one of the best tips I've heard on when you're assessing generative AI and you're thinking about implementing it in your organization is
welcome to the Redefining Sales podcast. I'm your host, Abby White. Today, we have got with us Alana Brittain. Now, if you have not come across Alana, she is one of the leaders at LinkedIn. Alana has been the head of strategic and enterprise LinkedIn sales solutions for ANZ and Asia for the past 6 years and has such an extensive background around all things sales. We invited Alana along to one of our webinars that we were running called the Sales Crossroads. And the feedback that we had on the insights that Alana shared on where is sales going, how is sales evolving, what are the mega trends that are happening, and so on. It was just so powerful. We got such amazing feedback that we wanted to actually take a snippet of my conversation with Alana during that webinar and provide it to you, our podcast listeners, so that you could also get in on the action and listen to these insights from Alana. So sit back, grab your pad, pen, get ready to take notes and listen to the fantastic conversation that we had with Alana. Hi, Alana. Good to have you.
Hi, Abby. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to have you with us.
No, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to jump into some of these themes that we've been talking about, you mentioned just then.
Fantastic. So I would love to start, Alana, with, I recently saw a video that you had online and a podcast recording where you'd sat down with LinkedIn's chief global economist,
Right.
and you had been talking about 2 mega trends that are existing in the market. So can you talk to us about these 2 mega trends?
Yeah, sure. And I think one is probably very well known and the other one is maybe not as overt. So you're right. I sat down with Karen Kimbrough, who is LinkedIn's chief economist, global economist. And we, when we talk about the tech that defined our times, we had personal computers, we had the internet, we had cloud computing, even mobile, but we are smack bang in the middle of one of the most disruptive pieces of tech, which is, to no one's surprise, generative AI, and its impact and use is far-reaching. And those that, the headline is that those that can embrace it early will be the winners in this game, or to be more dramatic or on theme, they'll survive rather than and thrive. So that is the first mega trend. And the reason it's so disruptive is that we've mapped it to nearly every job and every skill set globally. And it's amazing the far-reaching impact it's having and the total disruption to certain industries as well. Now, the second is generational. And that's really around millennials and Gen Z. So millennials, the generation that had the internet thrust upon them in their formative years, have been communicating digitally their entire life. If you think back, if anyone is a millennial on this podcast in Australia, on this webinar, you will remember MSN Messenger and how you were able to use it to communicate to your friends without having to call through the landline to Mrs. Jones to speak to Bobby or whoever it was that you were trying to call. So that was the first time you could communicate digitally. And it's just not stopped from there in terms of Facebook, Tinder. This is the generation that has been communicating digitally since their teenage years. And then we got Gen Z, which is the generation that haven't known anything different, the pure digital natives. And the reason that I'm talking about this is because they are actually in the majority of decision-making roles right now. They make up 65% of director level plus roles in ANZ. And it kind of crept in on us, but it's quite a shocking stat. And you might be thinking, well, why do I care about that? Or why does that make a difference? The reason you should care is because, and especially if you're one of them, you'll be able to identify with this, they prefer digital engagement. They grew up in an age of hyper-personalization. They expect it. They deeply research vendors before they even engage, so much so that the window to engage is only 5%. They change careers more often. Actually, the average tenure for a millennial is 2 years. The average tenure for a Gen Z is 1.1 years. So when we think about selling and consensus decision making and being able to forge multiple relationships across an organization to reach the buying circle, that's very hard to do when you're having a full turnover within a couple of years' time. And it makes the seller's job extremely hard. So that's really the two megatrends that we've been seeing, and they seep into every facet of how we do our roles in sales today and going forward.
And it's interesting because we're almost having to cater for everybody, because we've still got those people who I want to eyeball you, I want to see you face to face, I want to, go quite traditional. And then you have let's just talk online. I was talking to someone in your business who was saying that actually in Singapore, the trend is let's just WhatsApp everyone. And so you're having to kind of go and deal with actually the different preferences. And I look at it as actually going, it's not about me. Actually, Maz with X Factor is brilliant at this. She talks about the fact she doesn't like reality TV, but it's not for her, it's for her audience. And I think the same is true in sales. Even if you go, yeah, but I don't want to speak to a chatbot, it's not about you. It's kind of going, what are the different options that your audience want? And I think the latest stat I saw was people wanted over 10 different options for channels because everyone's got different preferences.
Yeah, I mean, you've never had to be more dynamic as a salesperson than now, because at the top end, we still have the boomers and Gen X really ruling the roost, but we have this emerging generation, and then the younger they get, the more digital you have to be. So flexing between those is a skill set of the modern day salesperson that we probably haven't seen before. And it's, you're right, you have to kind of pick and choose and be very adaptable in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think that means for, you talked about two mega trends there, right? What do you think that means for now, the winners and losers as we come into or towards FY25?
Yeah, in a nutshell, I think if you aren't deeply researching your customers, if you aren't broadly connecting with them beyond the main decision maker, and if you don't hyper personalize your outreach and your approach, you get lost in the digital noise. Because when you think about it, as I'm sitting here, I've got my phone on me, notifications are rolling in from my personal life, from my professional life. If you check down, there's probably 15 that have occurred in the last 20 minutes. Being able to break through that noise is incredibly difficult as we have our worlds emerge on one device. And so if you're not relevant to what the person is looking for at that time, or you don't have some way of cutting through, which is either through commonality or relevancy, then you're going to get lost in that process. And I think, to sort of one other ramification of that is that we in sales have always gone down this volume approach. When we had the automation wave, it was all around how many people can you spray and pray and capture in your funnel and bring them through. But volume is not the playbook of today. It really is quality engagement over quantity, because you've got an entire generation who've been burned by canned outreach, and they're really not taking it anymore. They've been, as you said before, shaped by the consumer world. So they want the Netflix experience in B2B selling.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I look at it as, I walk into work in the morning and one of our task IDs gets loads of junk mail, which I will never understand why. And I literally look at the first 3 words. And if it looks like white noise, it looks like rubbish, I just delete it. I do the same with LinkedIn messages. If something doesn't feel personalized to me, I find it even funnier when people offering me help with sales. I'm like, oh, hopefully I know something about that with what I do for a living. You actually it discredits that company. And like I mentioned, Kat from HubSpot was saying 1/3 of Australians are prepared to walk away from a business they love if they feel that. So I do think it's back to what Julie was talking about of, how you the translator, how you answering the questions that are most in tune with the customer, and then Maz's point of how you standing out, because otherwise it's just all white noise that you just are going to scroll past.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like the basic expectation is not only that you know their business and them really well, but you're somehow bridging that with what you do to create a unique insight that they don't have. And that's where you add value as a salesperson. You are niched with your expertise in the area that adds value to them. And you're marrying that to what you know about them and their industry. And that's where you can add value more than ever.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to talk to you about LinkedIn and IPOS just released only a couple of weeks ago, some fantastic research of over 2,000 sellers, and really looking at what do high performance salespeople do that we can learn from. Can you talk to us a little bit about that research?
Yeah, so for context, with that, we already at LinkedIn had a good idea about some of these trends. We could see them on the horizon, and we had a good idea about what it takes to sell in this market. And you may have heard a term, deep sales, which is what we really embody at LinkedIn, and what we think is the trend and the future way of selling. And so what underpins deep sales are three core habits that we think are really important for the modern day seller. One is the ability to prioritize high potential accounts. The second is to identify and build key buyer relationships broadly and deeply. And the third is being able to leverage things, what we call hidden allies and timely intel for relevant outreach. And I give you that context because we then partnered with a market research leader, which is Ipsos, and we surveyed 2,000 sellers and 500 buyers globally to understand the organizational value of this deep sales approach. And there were some really amazing stats that came out of Australia, if you're happy for me to share. Would you like to comment on that, or would you like me to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Great. So look, in Australia, those people that are doing those three habits that we're deeming deep sellers, so prioritizing accounts, identifying people, and finding hidden allies, they really, 75% of them use AI to prioritize accounts. So this is where we come full circle on these mega trends. They're already using AI to prioritize the best accounts. 79% of them agree that you will excel if you use AI in your role to be more productive. Deep sellers in Australia are more likely than shallow sellers to have 7 or more contacts across key personnel within accounts. And if they do, they're 7.3 more times likely to exceed quota because they've spent significant amount of time building relationships with current customers. So that's sort of something that's bridging that generative AI piece around being able to be really productive and research accounts in an efficient manner, but also the idea around that you need to forge more than 1 or 2 key relationships to be able to really effectively sell. And when you do that, your chances of hitting quota go up by 7-fold, which is incredible.
Yeah. And what I love about this, so I love an opportunity when I don't think many people are doing it. And I think that what's interesting is not many people are taking a deep sales approach. I think from memory it was something like 18% took a deep sales approach, which therefore goes, the opportunity to do what we've been talking about and stand out for crowd, actually, it's not that hard. And actually there's some great tools there, LinkedIn Sales Navigator being one of them, we can talk about in a sec, that it actually is relatively easy to actually go the extra 1%, go the extra mile, and not many people are doing it. So that level of personalization, standing out, and so on, you know, if you're a minority doing it, your chance of success is enormous.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating about that is that on the platform, we see people sharing more about themselves than ever before. During COVID, it was like something unlocked and everyone had a lot of time to think about their personal brand and what they believed in and what they wanted to espouse. And it became okay as well and embraced to share a lot more about your personal life as well as your professional life. So as a sales person, there has never been more information than you could glean ever on individuals, what they care about, you know, what really motivates them, what their interests are, what they're trying to achieve. And yet we still see so many people reaching out in a really canned, automated, templated way when they don't have to. You know, you can get that information and then be able to sort of craft a really well-meaning, you know, tailored message that's going to strike at the heart of the person that you're talking to and make them want to engage with you. So I find that to be odd. Can I just mention one more thing around the report, which I think is really interesting? And this is probably the surprise, which is that on the buyer side and on the seller side, in-person still matters. So buyers and sellers still prefer in-person meetings at some stage before the deal closes, which I think is interesting, given that we would have surveyed a lot of millennials and Gen Z. And I suspect that in-person is coming a little bit later down the funnel when you've already established trust and credibility, but it's still seen as the most effective way to accelerate relationships and, you know, be able to actually, you know, enter into a partnership with someone and close a deal.
Yeah, I do like that. I look at it as digital first, but not digital only. So that it might start online, but a bit like, if you were dating, I think sales and dating have a lot in common. You might start online, but then actually
Yeah.
at what point do you take it offline and you go
Next
meet?
level. That's
Yeah.
right.
I
And
haven't dated in 100 years, so I'm not sure I should be giving this advice, but apparently
oh,
that's
neither do I. Yes, I haven't been there for a while, and nor do I want to. But I think you're right there. And the other interesting element about the buyer side is that 50% of them would say that they would repeat purchase from a sales professional that they've already been sold to. And so this idea of long-standing relationships and building long-standing relationships for repeat business is still incredibly important, and something we need to think about as sales professionals as well, as we elevate this profession around really adding value to our clients in the long term as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I have to ask you before we go to questions from our audience. I've got to ask you, how does LinkedIn support this? Because I know my personal favorites of what LinkedIn does, and I do think you guys are part of this solution. I really do. So what's your lens on that?
Yeah, shameless plug for a sales
Go for
navigator.
the shameless plug.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. But the reason why is because this platform, Sales Navigator, is custom built to serve these habits and is ever evolving as well. And so when we look at that first habit of prioritizing high potential accounts, we can surface to people accounts that are growing. What's in your ideal customer profile from an industry lens? Those that are already engaging with your brand, so they're already warm to it. And of course, we've layered generative AI into understanding these customers quickly through things like Account IQ, which really turns 7 hours of research, where you would trawl through annual reports, where you would read news articles, etc. It takes 7 hours and turns it into 7 seconds and gives you a snapshot on how that company makes money, what are their pressures, what are their objectives, what is the competition doing. And so as a salesperson, you can really get efficient in understanding your customer's landscape and use that to engage in a meaningful manner. So that's around the prioritizing high potential accounts habit. The second around identifying and building key buyer relationships. Well, we've taken this idea of multi-level relationships and the fact that their movement presents so much risk and opportunity at the same time. And we've rolled those two things into what we call a relationship map. So it's fully dynamic. It flags when people move on in real time. It finds replacements. It prompts you for people in the buying circle that are involved in the decision as to whether they choose. And, those people are really having conversations behind your back around whether they choose you as a vendor or not. So your job is to have high quality conversations with them so that they are swinging your way. And then there's the data that surfaces to you to help you build that relationship. So whether it's leveraging a warm introduction, so if you know someone, Abby, that I need to be introduced to, it'll flag that. Or whether it's understanding what that individual is passionate about, like we just talked about in terms of gleaning information from the platform. And just the last piece is around finding hidden allies and timely intel. We've built functionality that surfaces past customers. So we can sync with the CRM and surface those. And then that means that you don't have to start that sales process again and again and again. You can accelerate your selling and you can accelerate your sales cycle through not having to start from fresh. And you can use those people as well, if you've got great relationships with them, to get an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes so that you know what next move you have to make, what relationship you have to build next. And then, as I said, beyond that, those that are already engaged with your brand, those that are heavily connected to your brand through, individual connections, we can surface those to you around the buyer intent. And then you can sort of capture people in that window in which they're trying to sort of search for a vendor, and you could be that vendor. So they're three. I mean, there's so much more in it. And being a Microsoft shop, we've had access to generative AI for a long time, and we've been really thoughtful about how we are building it into the platform. But the headline is that it's there to augment our skill set and allow us to lean into or rotate into the fun stuff in sales, which is really building high quality connections with people and, leaning into curiosity and problem solving and being able to build those deeper relationships.
I love that. And I'll give a super quick example to actually my own experience of this. I found recently LinkedIn Sales Navigator actually helps us do what we know we should do in a fraction of the time, like you just said. Rather than being 7 hours, it's 7 minutes. And I had a brilliant one recently of I got asked to do a keynote for a sales kickoff, and I was about to walk out the door and get on a plane, and I was like, I know that I need to respond quickly because that's important. I know I need to respond personalized because that's important. And I feel a massive sense of pressure in what I do to practice what you preach. And so I was like, so I literally went onto Account IQ, saw the snapshot overview about this company, really quickly personalized from it. And I had it sent off, honestly, within about 15 minutes, but it allowed me to still respond quickly, personalize, look at what was important to them, pull out some awards and notifications they've just been. And so to me, it's actually allowing you to do what you know you should do, but in a fraction of the time and in a greater way. So that was my own experience of it recently.
And it's great for a sales leader. I have to say, like, I've got a large team. I can't possibly be across every deal, every customer. But if I'm involved in an executive engagement and I want to understand what does this company do and how can I actually add value here, I can get a really quick understanding of that as a brief. And then we're on the same page in terms of what they're trying to achieve and how that's been validated and how we can help and add value there. So I 100% agree. It's a game changer. And I had people personally pinging me after it was released, saying it's like the best thing that they've seen in Sales Navigator for years. So
yeah, I agree with that. I agree. So Alana, let's go back to our questions in the question box. So I can see 2 here. Have you had a peeky look?
I have had a look, yes, and I think I can answer both of these.
Go for it.
So first question for everyone listening is, apart from having a growth mindset, which by the way is incredibly important for these 2 trends, what can you do as an enablement partner, especially in relation to generative AI? Apart from, depending on how much agency you have on what you can choose that the company invests in, one of the best tips I've heard on when you're assessing generative AI and you're thinking about implementing it in your organization is, firstly, ask where the data is coming from, because the quality of the data informs the quality of the output. And so the reason that we're very proud of what we've got on offer with Sales Navigator and LinkedIn is because the data is first party and it is dynamic. And so it's about as true as you can get in terms of an individual telling you about themselves. So that's the first thing you should be asking any vendor presenting to you on Gen AI, because a lot of them will have solutions regarding it and you'll see them popping up everywhere. The second is, how are they fine-tuning the model? And so what tweaks are being made to ensure that the information that's being presented is accurate, is ethical, is really considered. And I suppose if you can ask those 2 questions, then you'll be able to vet through like what is going to be helpful for your team in terms of their use and what might be potentially not. And that's a good starting point. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. As an enablement partner, when I was talking to Karen Kimbrough about what is the lifelong skill that we need, just generally as a professional, and it is lifelong learning. Like, I think 65% of our skill set is going to change in the next 5 to 6 years. It'll be augmented or it'll be adapted. So the ability to encourage your teams to continuously invest in learning and upskilling is going to be key to future-proofing them for their careers into the future as well. So I hope that answers that question.
I absolutely agree with that. And then we've got time for one more question, which I think we can see there.
Yeah. How do you reconcile the fact that LinkedIn is perpetuating the white noise problem, which I think Abby was talking about previously, with canned pro forma text and commenting on others' posts and promotion announcements? I think you're talking about the prompted Gen AI. One thing I will say, firstly, thankfully, we have a large team behind us that are fine-tuning the model. So as we, invest further in generative AI, we will see improvements on how they adapt that generative AI prompt and how relevant it is to the market as you're using it. But the one thing that I will say around LinkedIn is they're being very thoughtful about the kind of content that they're promoting on the platform as well. And so you would have seen maybe 5 years ago that there was this creeping sense of cute cats getting 1 million likes and professional content that is really useful getting 5. And we've done a whole overhaul of how we class content. And we're really looking to elevate what we call gold content, which is where you lean into your deep expertise and your experience and you espouse that out to the market And the people that have the relevancy to that pick it up. And if they're liking it very quickly, then you'll see that content go viral and be amplified. And if not, then you see that content go out to your network that still get a lot of value out of it. But the idea around content and content sharing is, again, more the quality rather than quantity. And so I'm hoping that you will see a change in the platform as the algorithm picks up and learns from you personally on what's working and what's not. And with the generative AI prompting, again, we have a full team behind that. We'll be monitoring this investment very closely and making sure that it is adding value. So please, if you've got any feedback around that, when you're in an app, feel free to shake the phone. I know that's a bit of an unusual thing, but if you shake in the LinkedIn app, you can provide feedback on that. And that'll go straight to our team to be looking at how we can improve what we're doing on the Gen AI space as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I agree with that. I would add my own just final thought on that as well, is I feel like we're all having to be a little bit braver leaning into some of the messages that stand out. You know, I'll be really transparent. Coming out with this series, the Sales Crossroads, Evolution or Extinction, my team will tell you, I was like, oh, is it too far? Is it too much? Is it about right? You know, am I being offensive? And I had that conversation, but I found that leaning into it a little bit and being a little bit bolder has helped.
100%. And I know Graham has put a follow-up there on, you know, how you can best use the platform, how to use the algorithm. We have a whole team that is dedicated to content generation and what is best practices in terms of content. If anyone is wanting to reach out on that, I'd be happy to take that offline, because there are some things like being bold and contrarian really does fly on the platform, taking a stance on edge issues. But there are a whole bunch of other tips and tricks that we can share around best practice content and what is valuable to both the audience and to you as a thought leader.
Amazing. If you guys want to connect with Alana, obviously feel free to do so. I think you know where to find her on LinkedIn, and I'm sure she'll be happy to help you. Alana, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really, really appreciate it. If you want to connect with Alana, then go to our show notes where you'll find the link to connect with her on LinkedIn, of course. You'll also find links to other educational resources that you can access, such as, if you missed the memo, our new YouTube channel. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode of the Redefining Sales podcast.